Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. It's Saturday, September 9th, and today and tomorrow we will be presenting excerpts of an interview that I recently conducted with Chris Guillebeau. If that name rings a bell, it's because he has been a guest on the podcast previously. He had come on to talk about his then new-ish book, which was called Side Hustle, but he's also written a bestseller called The $100 Startup, The Happiness of Pursuit, and then The Money Tree. I think that was the last one he was on for. Today, we're talking about his newest book called Gonzo, Capitalism. The subtitle is How to Make Money in an Economy That Hates You. Whoa, that's a little bit rough, Chris. Anyway, check this out. This is part of our Jill on Money live subscription service. If you want to hear the whole interview or watch the whole interview, you should subscribe. $35 for the year, quarterly access to the live webinars we're presenting, and bonus content like this interview with Chris. So without further ado, here's the first part of our interview with Chris Guillebeau. I remember in Side Hustle, one of the big takeaways for me was that you were really encouraging people to use something that they do already and explore that and see if there's something to be done with that skill set. And how does that apply in Gonzo Capitalism?
I think it still very much applies. I don't think it has changed. It has like adapted and so on, but the principles of the $100 startup or side hustle, those are timeless principles. And just like the phrase side hustle, I didn't create them. Like I used to live in West Africa. I was there for years, and then I traveled, all over the world elsewhere. In much of the like rural part of the world, everyone is just buying and selling and making their own way. There's an absence of formal government. And so if you study, okay, where there's a demand for something, where there's a problem, what is the solution that I can provide to that problem? And just kind of making that very practical. That's a lot of what I try to do in Side Hustle, and $100 Startup. With Gonzo Capitalism, I think the change is the pace, the speed, the scale of it, the decentralized nature of it, in some cases. Like there's a story of this guy named Alex from France, and he wanted to have some money to pursue a business idea. And rather than go on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, and rather than go through the traditional like venture capital market, he basically found direct investment through Twitter. He was just posting some, tweets, and he spoke at a conference and exchanged a portion of his future earnings for, I think it was like a $20,000 investment to move to the States and pursue his business. So it's faster, more decentralized, and also kind of just weird in some ways. Like there's a lot of things that are just kind of weird or strange that we look at and we're like, that's not something that I relate to, about having 1 million followers when you're 15 years old or whatever the story may be, but that's the world that we live in.
Let's talk about how we can take away some of the, maybe not the $1 million part of it, but sure. How can we react to this new phase, which, as you said, is weird. I love that you put that in the book, because I do think that it is a weird thing to imagine that somebody who has no credentials can like pop into the universe and attract capital, followers, monetize themselves, all of that. But what can we mere mortals do to be part of this?
Sure, absolutely. So I like this concept of taking asymmetrical risks. And an asymmetrical risk is one in which, the upside is so much greater than the downside. Like you're not guaranteed of being successful, but if it works, it's going to work really, really well. And if it doesn't work, it's just fine. You move on. So what is an asymmetrical risk? Lots of things you can do throughout life. Writing a book is an asymmetrical risk. Takes some time, of course. Time is valuable, but you're writing a book. It could end up, changing the world, or at least changing the life of somebody who reads it. You could ask somebody out. Right? You could pursue a relationship with anyone, and maybe not even just a romantic relationship. You choose to get closer to someone, or you invest in community, and you ask yourself, what could I do that could have just a great potential for return? And of course, you can think of that in economic terms as well. I could start a side hustle without spending a lot of money. And if it takes off, that's amazing. If it doesn't, okay, I've lost a small amount of money. That's all right. Another thing you can do is actively experiment. So throughout the book, like each chapter, I'm doing different little experiments of my own. I think part of the reason it took me a long time to write this book is because I'm compulsive and I get kind of sucked into things, right? And I'm like, I don't just research, like I want to actually like understand and do it. So I spent several months playing video games for real money. There's a whole chapter about that, about these blockchain video games, where people are like making and losing lots of money. There's this whole concept of prediction markets where you can bet on political elections and all sorts of other outcomes. How many people are going to go through the TSA checkpoint line? And like I bet on Britney Spears' conservatorship, like at what point she's going to get released and such, and so people are actually making real money doing this. So that's just an example of an experiment. You can learn about these things, you can kind of delve into them, and maybe it turns into something great and maybe it doesn't, but then you learn something and you try something else.
If you liked that little snippet, then you should check out the Jill on Money live service. That's where you have access to quarterly live webinars and bonus content like this interview with Chris. You may also want to check out Chris's daily podcast, and that's called Side Hustle School. So wherever you find your podcast, you'll find that. And by the way, wherever you're listening to this podcast, please leave us a rating and review. Lift someone up, change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.